Okay, well, let's get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today for our Woman Don't Be Fooled webinar. This is all about protecting your financial security. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Robert Seid. I'm a partner at Blue Summit Wealth Management, and we focus in financial planning and sustainable investing for our clients. So I just want to go over a few of the house rules and how the webinar works. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a few things. You should see a Q&A box, an option to raise your hand, as well as a chat box. So you can interact with me through the chat box or the Q&A or raising your hand, and we can chat directly through that. The schedule today is going to be about 30 minutes plus of presentation, and then we'll have 5 to 10 minutes for questions at the end. And if there's any questions that we can't get to, we can address them offline. So what we'll be covering in today's webinar are a number of topics, including the retirement gender gap, estate planning documents during a divorce, and protecting your inheritance. So I would like to introduce our speakers today, Mandie Bullock and Judith Seid. Mandie has been an attorney for 12 years, and her focus is estate planning and kids protection planning. She is passionate about helping families create happy and secure futures, and in her spare time, she enjoys yoga, mountain biking, and exploring the outdoors with her family. Judy Seid is a founder and partner at Blue Summit and is a licensed certified financial planner. She has been helping people make smart decisions with their money for nearly 30 years and has specialized in sustainable and responsible investments for that entire time. In her spare time, Judy is a cyclist and enjoys backpacking in the Sierras. So without further ado, I would like to let Judy take the floor. Go ahead, Judy.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you on this wonderful April 1st, in honor of which we are going to start our Women Don't Be Fooled series with some tips for April 1st. How to be smart with your money, party hardy, and survive an economic collapse. With a little tongue in cheek, I'll share some of my great April 1st, April Fool's Day tips with you. Number 1, spending. Number 2, get rich quick tricks. Number 3, taxes. And number 4, investing. I won't read them all off, but with spending, debt, first of all, get into as much debt as possible. After all, you can always declare bankruptcy, right? Why not let the credit card companies fund your vacations? Make sure to keep your bankruptcy attorney's number handy, of course. And if the government thinks it's okay to have $21 trillion in debt, then why shouldn't that be okay for you? Shopping, consumption is so important for our economy that you should shop as often as possible, ladies. After all, if you don't need it, you can just give it away to somebody who might need it. So just some spending habits for today. Get rich quick tricks. Gambling, I say go out, buy some lottery tickets, go to the local casinos. You could always marry rich and then get divorced, because we've got some great divorce tips for you. Lawsuits, why not just be like Stella Liebeck? She sued McDonald's, and she sued because her coffee was too hot. Guess what she got? $600,000. You could do it too. And taxes, well, heck, don't pay those. You could save lots of money on tax prep fees as well as taxes. And just open an offshore account if you want to avoid any problems with the IRS. Totally legal, by the way. And last of all, investing, diversification, it's bad. Don't do this. My suggestion is invest in the hot 2 to 3 stock tips that you hear on the news, and don't diversify. It'll only dilute your portfolio. It's just put your money on a couple options on the roulette wheel and hope you get lucky. So there you have it for April Fools. So just a little fun for you all today. What I'm actually going to cover are 6 items And these are real financial tips to protect your financial security. So hopefully you'll get what you want out of this workshop today. And if there's anything we don't cover, as Robert said, we're happy to work with you offline, and we will save a little time for questions. So my first topic is going to be the retirement gender gap. So let me get right into that. And Mandie Bullock and I, who were so lucky to have her today with all of her experience on estate planning, she and I are going to be taking turns, and I'm going to do a topic, and then I'm going to turn it over to her, and then she'll do a topic, and we're going to give you a little switcheroo back and forth. So let's talk about the retirement gender gap. And so women really do have it harder preparing for retirement than men do. It's not just a made up story. We have had wage inequality for ages, and we still have it. The wage inequality gap is closing, but we still have, women overall do not make as much as men, and even women in the same professions. We have longer life expectancies. Therefore, we have to save more theoretically for retirement, because we're going to live longer in retirement. Either we have to work longer or we have to save more. We've got higher healthcare costs because we live longer, and we live longer and stay healthier, but need more medical care during our lifetime for that reason. And then, as everybody knows, we have career interruptions more than men do, mostly to provide for pregnancy, childbirth, raising kids, and also caring for elderly parents or family members. So all of those things add up to, a problem that we have to solve. Now, how do we do that? And what suggestions do I have for you? I call it maximize, start, estimate, maintain, and consider. So number one, make sure to be maximizing your retirement plan contributions. If you do not have, most people through their work have a 401k plan or a tax deferred savings plan of some type. You want to make sure you're putting as much as you can into that plan. Obviously, the IRS has a limit depending upon what type of plan, but we want you to be putting in as much as you possibly can. Nobody ever got to retirement and said, uh-oh, I saved too much money. So, when you are payroll deducting and you're putting in a pre-tax contribution, whatever you're putting in, you're not going to feel that much. If you're putting in $100, you might have only taken home $75 because the other 25 might have gone to taxes. So remember, you can always defer a little bit more than you have extra coming in every month. Start saving early is huge. Somebody who starts saving when they're younger as opposed to older gets all of the benefit of compound interest. And when you start saving earlier and you've got a large enough nest egg, that gives you a lot more flexibility on when you can retire. We recently had a client who thought she had to work another 5 years. We worked through a financial plan for her, and because she had started to save early and because she had maxed out her retirement plan every year, she's actually, we just gave her the news, she's actually able to retire, and she's only 57, and she thought for sure she was going to have to work till 60. So it's hard to do, but if you do it, you'll always be glad later. Estimating your retirement income needs, that's also very helpful. Once you get to a certain point and you kind of have a stable sense of how much you spend, the key is to track your expenses pre-retirement and then estimate what changes might occur. Are you going to need, if you retire, you're going to need to allot money for, let's say, your health care that may have been provided through work. Are you going to spend more money on travel because now you have more time to travel? So projecting out your post-retirement cash flow needs on top of, having tracked your pre-retirement is how you're going to get at that estimate for your retirement income needs. And that's a very, very important part of planning for retirement. What one person spends in retirement is not necessarily what you're going to spend. Maintaining your skills and contacts. This is very important if you have a career interruption. So if you're, having a leave of absence for a small child, raising children, caring for parents, continuing to do professional development, continuing to stay in contact with colleagues, staying in your professional groups is going to be very helpful when it's time to get back into the workforce. And lastly, pre-retirement, one of the big things people neglect to do is to consider long-term care expenses. And that is a big problem because it's very, very costly, and you can insure for long-term care. It's a form of health insurance. And looking at a long-term care policy while you're still healthy is really important, because if you have a health issue, you may not be able to get that insurance later on. So this is just a bit about the retirement gender gap, but I'm going to turn it over to Mandie for some great estate planning tips for women. Your turn, Mandie.
Thanks so much, Judy. Okay, I'm going to put my screen up here. Okay. All right, so yeah, I'll be talking about estate planning considerations for women. Let's see here. Okay, so I just wanted to go over a couple basics. So yeah, estate planning is the process of making sure your family, your team, your clients aren't left with a mess if something happens to you. So yeah, so you do it for them, not simply for you, and yet you end up benefiting in so many ways. And I'll just tell you a quick story about my mom and how a lack of planning ended up in a huge mess for the family. My mom passed away 8 years ago with no planning in place, no will, no trust, and she and my dad had divorced just prior to that, and they still owned a house together. So she knew she needed to do her estate planning, but just never got around to it. And so once she got sick, it was too hard to do at that point. She didn't want to think about it. She wanted to think about living. And so my brother and I had to deal with probate, which is the court process that your heirs have to go through if you die either with a will in place or with nothing in place. And so this was a super long process. It took over 2 years. It was expensive. We had to post a pricey bond each year. And this was New Jersey, which is supposedly a probate-friendly state. It's supposed to be quicker and cheaper there. California is not probate-friendly. It's very expensive here. But the worst part of it was the emotional toll it took on my brother and I. And we made my brother executor because he was there physically in New Jersey, and I was back in California with a new baby, and he was not handling her death well, and it became a nightmare. My mom, like I said, my mom and dad were divorced but still owned a house together, so that became this really hard piece for my brother to deal with. And if my mom had known the toll this was taking on the relationship with my brother and I, she would have been heartbroken. So yeah, looking back, she could have avoided a lot of the stress with a trust. She could have put her share of the house and all of her other assets into her trust. She could have named a trustee who was maybe a little removed from the family, like a sibling or a friend, who would have seamlessly distributed her share of the house and the other assets to my brother and I outside of court, privately, quickly, allowing my brother and I to grieve without that added stress. So when you clean up this mess during your lifetime, you're really giving your loved ones a gift. So if something happens to you, the last thing your loved ones need is this mess. And what they need is time to grieve. They need to feel supported and receive guidance. And the coolest part of this whole thing is that even though you start off doing this process for them, by the time you're done, you find out that it was really for you all along. You'll feel so much stronger, more present, more organized, more clear about the rest of your life. So yes, all of this from estate planning. Okay, well, yeah, I will throw it back over to Judy, and then I'll talk about estate planning during divorce when I come back.
All right, thank you, Mandie. We are going to flip back over to my agenda here, and we talked about the retirement gender gap. We're now going to talk about breadwinning women and life balance. I can definitely tell you I have personal experience with this, having raised 3 children and being the breadwinner. This really speaks to me, as I'm sure so many of you on this call today. How can you have it all? Well, we're not superhuman. We think we are, but we can't actually do everything. So in order to have, if you are a breadwinner, and I will give you a couple statistics, in a third of couples in the United States, a woman actually earns more than her partner. So I was not that surprised to hear that today. That's what's happening. And millennial women, now the millennials are earning 95% of what their male counterparts earn. So we talked earlier about the gender gap in pay that is closing in, especially with younger people. So that's a pretty big deal. But one thing that isn't equal is that breadwinning moms say they're a lot less satisfied with their home lives than breadwinning dads. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed by everything you have to manage. And we are also called the sandwich generation. We've got kids to care for, but we've also got elderly parents to care for. So that also puts a strain. So I've got some tips here that I've used a lot of these, if not all of these, myself. The first is to outsource some everyday tasks that are easy to outsource. Obviously, everybody thinks of house cleaning, but why stop there? These days, it's easier than ever, especially since COVID and with Amazon Prime and food delivery services, Grubhub and everything. You can outsource food delivery. You can outsource laundry and shopping. You can get food services like HelloFresh. Those things are great. You order those boxes of kind of all of the ingredients come in, and you just throw it together in a pot, and within 10 minutes, you kind of have a gourmet meal. So I have found these things to be really helpful. I won't say that I do everything, but definitely I have not been able to do all those things myself, and I've needed help. So secondarily, I would say budgeting your time. That's just huge. Making lists, keeping track of what needs to be done, checking those things off your list is going to make a huge difference in being able to feel like you're on top of things and not feel overwhelmed. I know if I try to keep too many things in my head of all the things that need to get done, I feel very overwhelmed. So budgeting your time, having time for me time, which is going to the next one, how to manage your stress, make me time, make shopping time once a week, be efficient about your tasks and your time. It's easier than ever to get into a time suck with the computer, with Facebook and Instagram and all of those social media platforms. So making sure that you budget your time. In fact, recently I used my own tools on my Android phone to limit my social media time so that I wouldn't waste any more time than I felt like I had. So lots of good technology that can help you with that. Making sure you have me time, yoga, walking with friends. I recently read a book called Growing Young, and it says the very best thing you can do for your longevity and staying healthy and living long is having good personal relationships, friends, marriage or partner. It's very, very important for our health. Next tip I have for you is mentorship. I think that, if you can find that in your career or even as a parent, for example, mentorship is really helpful to us as women. And I know I had that when I started in my career. It's very helpful. Working with a financial advisor. I did not put that in there. This actually came from some of my online research. Although I wish I said I would have, but I would have felt like I was too self-promotional. But working with a financial advisor is actually something that is recommended for women and life balance and breadwinning women. You're making money, you need to manage it properly. And working with a financial advisor like myself and us at Blue Summit is probably going to be one of the very best things you can do. You do what you do best, you make money, you do your career, and you let us help you with your finances. And the last two things have to do again with relationships. Having healthy spouse relations is huge. There's nothing more stressful than arguing or fighting over small things. So communication is always going to be the key. In weekly meetings with your spouse or with your children, getting our calendars out, making sure we have everybody's schedules, we know where we're supposed to be. And that way you can plan trips, you can plan fun things. And those weekly planning meetings are super important. So that's what I have on that topic. And I'm going to turn it over now to Mandie.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, so estate planning during divorce. Yeah, a lot of people I know have been asking about this recently, so I'm glad we're talking about it. If you die or become incapacitated while your divorce is ongoing and you haven't updated your estate plan, your soon-to-be ex-spouse could end up with complete control over your life and assets. So scary. That's generally not a good idea, nor what you would want. And so I'm going to talk about a few of the most important updates you should consider making as soon as you know divorce is on the horizon. So changing your beneficiary designations. So I'm talking about on your retirement, your 401k, your IRAs. So for example, if you get remarried following your divorce, but haven't changed your beneficiary of, your 401k plan to name your new spouse, the ex your ex, your ex who you might have divorced 15 years ago could end up with your retirement account upon your death. And here in California, once either spouse files divorce papers with the courts, neither party can legally change their beneficiaries without the other spouse's permission until the divorce is final. So with this in mind, if you're anticipating a divorce, you probably want to consider changing your beneficiaries prior to filing your divorce papers, and then post-divorce, you can always change them again to match whatever is determined in the divorce settlement. Okay, and then next, power of attorney. So if you were to become incapacitated, say by illness or injury during your divorce, the very person you're paying big money to legally remove from your life would be granted complete authority over all of your legal, financial, and medical decisions. So given this, it's vital that you update your power of attorney documents as soon as you know divorce is coming. So your estate plan should include both a durable financial power of attorney and a medical power of attorney. So the durable financial power of attorney allows you to grant a person of your choice the legal authority to make financial and legal decisions on your behalf should you become unable to make such decisions for yourself. And then similarly, a medical power of attorney grants someone legal authority to make your healthcare decisions in the event of your incapacity. Okay, and then your will. So creating a new will is not something that can wait until after your divorce. In fact, you should create a new will as soon as you decide to get divorced. Since once divorce papers are filed, you may not be able to change your will. And because most married couples name each other as their executor and the beneficiary of their estate, it's really important to name a new person to fill these roles. So yeah, when creating your new will, rethink how you would want your assets divided upon your death. And this most likely means naming new beneficiaries for any assets that you had previously left to your future ex and his or her family. And then, also keep in mind that community property laws that entitle your surviving spouse to a certain percentage of your marital estate upon your death, no matter what your will dictates. So if you die before the divorce is final, you probably won't be able to entirely disinherit your surviving spouse through the new will, but it's almost certain you wouldn't want him or her to get everything. So with this in mind, you should create your new will as soon as possible once the divorce is inevitable, to ensure that the proper individuals inherit that remaining percentage of your estate should you pass away while your divorce is still ongoing. And then finally, your trust. So if you already have a revocable living trust set up, you'll want to review it and update it too. Like wills, the laws governing if, when, and how you can alter a trust during a divorce can vary. So yeah, you should definitely consult with me as soon as possible if you're considering divorce. And in addition to reconsidering what assets your soon-to-be ex-spouse should receive through the trust, you'll probably want to replace him or her as successor trustee if they are so designated. And if you don't have a trust in place, you should seriously consider creating one, especially if you have minor children. Trusts provide a wide range of powers and benefits that are unavailable through a will, and they're particularly well suited for blended families. And given the likelihood that both you and your spouse would eventually get remarried and perhaps have more children, trusts are an invaluable way to protect and manage the assets you want your children to inherit. And then by using a trust, for example, should you die or become incapacitated while your kids are minors, you can name someone of your choosing to serve as successor trustee to manage their money until they reach adulthood. And this would make it impossible for your ex to meddle with that inheritance. And then beyond that key benefit, trusts afford you several other layers of enhanced protection and control that are not possible with a will. So yeah, I will, actually, I'll keep going if I have a minute. Well, you know what? No, I'll go back to Judy. Okay, go for it, Judy.
All right. Thank you, Mandie. Those were some really important tips, because women who get divorced often fail to take care and wrap everything up. So my next topic is life insurance shortfalls for women. And this is important because major life changes can often impact the amount of life insurance that you might need. And reviewing that is important, as it is to review all of your insurance coverage limits. But what I want to say most of all is roughly 1 in 3 couples don't even have life insurance. Now, women are even less likely to know the terms of their spouse's life insurance policy. So for women, we really need to know what's there and decide what we need to have. 49% of women surveyed say their ability to make mortgage payments, save for college tuition for their kids, pay for bills, basically maintain their lifestyle, would be adversely affected by the death of their spouse, compared with 37% of men. And not to mention the fact that, once again, it's more problematic for us because we live longer than men. So we actually live, as of 2021, 5 years in the US longer than men. Our life expectancy is 81 versus 76. Yay for us. And 43% of those with life insurance say that they wouldn't be financially prepared if they lost their spouse. I will tell you a story here. We knew somebody, unfortunately they weren't a client, or we probably would have had them get life insurance for the family, but this was my child's dentist years ago. And he and his wife had 4 small children, and he died suddenly, very unexpectedly. Had some kind of a health condition that he was unaware of. And he was the 100% breadwinner. She didn't work at all. He, made very good money. They had a nice lifestyle, as oftentimes dentists do. And she was left with no way to fund the current lifestyle. Everything changed for her. So I'm sure that's not the way that they wanted it. So, it's important to think about that and to think, what life insurance do I need? How do you figure that out? Well, is there somebody that's dependent upon you for your income, or are you dependent on somebody else's income? And if so, then your family needs life insurance. How do you figure out how much? Well, what you're going to need to do is calculate what your financial obligations are. First of all, you need to replace the income. So if hubby doesn't come home from work one day, you're going to need to replace that income that you're living off of. So how much is the salary? And how many years are you going to need to replace that income for? What's your mortgage balance? If you're going to pay off the mortgage, what are other debts? What are future college needs? And any other expenses that you are going to have to plan for. If you're a stay-at-home parent, you're going to need to add in the cost of the things that you do. So if you were taking all the kids to school and now you need somebody to do that, or if your spouse was doing that, now you need to pay somebody to do that and to drive them around and to come after school, then you're going to have to work all of that in. And then from there you subtract, what are your assets that you already have, and what current life insurance do you already have, and that's your shortfall that you need to insure for. Life insurance is a very complicated thing to plan for because it does change. It changes, when your kids are young versus when they're grown and you no longer have them to support. And now perhaps, you are going to be impacted by your spouse's death or vice versa, and you just have each other to plan for. And that also impacts the type of life insurance policy that you would get, whether you get a term policy or a whole life or a universal life policy. So there's numerous different types of life insurance policies. And if you do have any specific questions about life insurance policies, we are happy to do a life insurance policy review for you. It is complicated. It's not an easy figure to get at. How much do you need? It is a complex calculation. So let's just leave it at that. We could talk for an hour just about life insurance needs, but I'm going to turn it over to Mandie for her next topic.
Thank you, Judy. Very good advice. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to use 3 kind of stories, hypothetical scenarios to talk about how a failure to update your estate plan after a midlife remarriage could have the potential to accidentally disinherit your closest family members, as well as deplete your assets down to virtually nothing. So yeah, from there, we'll look at how these negative outcomes could be easily avoided using a variety of different planning solutions. Okay, so scenario number 1, accidentally disinheriting your children from a previous marriage. So John has 2 adult children, David and Alexis, from a prior marriage. He marries Moira, who has 1 adult child, Patrick. The blended family gets along well, and because he trusts Moira will take care of his children in the event of his death, John's estate plan leaves everything to Moira. But then, after just 2 years of being married, John dies suddenly of a heart attack, and his nearly $1.4 million in assets go to Moira. Moira is extremely distraught following John's death, and although she planned to update her plan to include David and Alexis, she never gets around to it and dies just a year after John. So upon her death, all of the assets she brought into the marriage, along with all of John's assets, pass on to her son, Patrick, while David and Alexis receive nothing. So by failing to update his estate plan to ensure that David and Alexis are taken care of, John left the responsibility for what happens to his assets entirely to Moira. So whether intentionally or accidentally, Moira's failure to include David and Alexis in her own plan resulted in them being entirely disinherited from their father's estate. So there are several planning options John could have used to avoid this outcome. He could have created a revocable living trust that named an independent successor trustee to manage the distribution of his assets upon his death. to ensure a more equitable division of his estate between his spouse and his children. Or he could have created two separate trusts, one for Moira and one for his children, in which John specified exactly what assets each individual received. Or he might have also taken advantage of tax-free gifts to his two children during his lifetime. So whichever option he ultimately decided on, if John had consulted, an experienced estate planning attorney, he could have ensured that his children would have been taken care of in the manner that he desired. Okay, scenario 2, accidentally disinheriting your spouse. So Mark was married to Gwen for 30 years, and they had 3 children together, all of whom are now adults. When their 3 kids were young, Mark and Gwen both created wills in which they named each other as their sole beneficiaries. When they were both in their 50s and their kids had grown, Bob and Gwen divorced. Several years later, at age 60, Bob married Veronica, a widow with no children of her own. Bob was very healthy, so he didn't make updating his estate plan a priority. But within a year of his new marriage, Bob died suddenly in a car accident. So Bob's estate plan, written several decades ago, leaves all of his assets to ex-wife Gwen, or if she is not living at the time of his death, to his children. So state law presumes that Gwen has predeceased Bob because they divorced after the will was executed. At the time, they divorced after the time the will was enacted, So thus, all of Bob's assets, including the house he and Veronica were living in, passed to his children. So Veronica receives nothing and is forced out of her home when Bob's children sell it. So by failing to update his estate plan to reflect his current situation, Bob unintentionally disinherited Veronica and forced her into this precarious financial position just as she was entering retirement. So again, if Bob had worked with an estate planning attorney to create a living trust, he could have arranged his assets so they would go to and work for exactly the people he wanted them to benefit. So if he wanted the bulk of his assets to go to his children, but didn't want to cause any disruption to Veronica's life, he could have put his house, along with funds for its maintenance, into the trust for her benefit during her lifetime, and left the remainder of the assets to his kids. So this would allow Veronica to live in and use the house as her own for the rest of her life, but upon her death, the house would pass to Bob's children. And then the last scenario, so allowing assets to become depleted. So this is the last thing we want to avoid. So Steve is a divorcee in his early 60s with 2 adult children when he marries Susan. Steve has an estate valued at around $850,000, and he has told his kids that after he passes away, he hopes that they will use the money that's left to fund college accounts for their own children. But he also wants to ensure Susan is cared for. So he establishes a living trust in which he leaves all of his assets to Susan, and upon her death, the remainder to his 2 children. But soon after Steve dies, Susan suffers a debilitating stroke. She requires round-the-clock in-home care for several decades, which is paid for by Steve's trust. When she does pass away, the trust has been almost totally depleted, and Steve's children inherit virtually nothing. So yeah, an experienced estate planning attorney could have helped Steve avoid this unfortunate outcome. Steve could have stipulated in his living trust that a certain portion of his assets must go to his children upon his death, while the remainder passes to Susan. So Steve might have also used life insurance to provide cash for Susan's care upon his death. Or he could have purchased a second to die life insurance policy for himself and Susan. naming his children as beneficiaries. So such a policy would ensure that regardless of the amount remaining in the trust, Steve's children would receive an inheritance upon Susan's death. Okay, I might have to skip a couple things here. We're getting short on time. I will turn it back over to you, Judy.
All right, thank you, Mandie. And yes, we are getting a little short on time. I am going to go through these number 4, number 5 together here, protecting your inheritance and women in divorce. So protecting your inheritance, the most important thing that I want to impart upon this group today is that inheritance does not have to be community property. In fact, it is not meant to be community property. Women stand to receive the largest inheritance, amount of inheritance in 2021 that we've ever seen. And it's very important to know that if you do not keep it separated from other assets and you're married, it could be viewed as community property. In California, we are a community property state, and everything that you earn during the marriage and accumulate during the marriage is considered community property. But if you receive an inheritance during the time you are married, you have to treat it very carefully. We always have our clients open a separate investment account to receive their inheritance funds. Now, it's obviously your choice if you want to commingle it and have it be considered community property. But if you want to have any flexibility about that, then you very much need to keep it separated. You need to be careful about receiving non-monetary contributions. So for example, if you own a home and then your spouse helps you fix that home up by putting a sweat equity into it. Let's say he performs a house remodel, then all of a sudden you have turned that home into some level of community property. Commingling would be putting the money into, let's say, a joint account. You want to avoid that. You want to avoid transmutation of assets, and that's similar to commingling, but it's basically when there's a gradual process of combining separate and marital property. So let's say, for example, you have a marital home, but let's say you have a home that you paid for from your inheritance. Let's use that as an example. And yet combined income, marital income paid to pay the property taxes, paid the repairs. You're all of a sudden you're slowly kind of combining assets, and now it's not going to be considered so much separate property anymore. So those are the things you need to be careful about doing. You can also use an asset protection trust, which Mandie would stand ready to help you with. So counseling with a professional at the time of receiving an inheritance is very, very important. And now let me move to women in divorce. I want to thank Michelle Brown. Thank you, Michelle, for these wonderful tips. She is a partner at Procopio and a very well-known divorce attorney here in San Diego. She shared her very top 5 tips for women and divorce. The first of which is to review and copy all your financial documents. Make sure that you have your tax returns, your bank statements, your financial plans, everything that would document where money might be hiding. It's very easy for people to not know, women to not know where the money's at. So getting your hands on all of those things before you leave the property, and getting those scanned in or getting pictures with your phone is her very top tip for women and divorce. And the rest here are very important as well. Meeting with a financial planner at the onset of your divorce. Your family law attorney and your financial planner can work on a strategy. Plan if you have any complex issues, if you own businesses, things like that. Mental health, see a therapist. And kids, always remember that your children have the right to love both parents without feeling guilty. I absolutely love, this is word for word what she wrote. The best gift you can give your child is to make sure they know it's okay to talk about the fun things they do with the other parent, or say they miss or love the other parent in front of you. You will relieve your child of a heavy burden by doing so. So I'm gonna turn it back to Mandie for her last tips, and then we'll be closing out and taking questions. Take it away, Mandie.
Thanks, Judy. That was so important. Thank you. Okay, I'll just quickly go through these last things. I wanted to go quickly over protecting your children's inheritance. So it's hard to give yourself asset protection. So California doesn't allow self-settled asset protection trust. You could, do an offshore asset protection trust that gets super expensive and cumbersome. But you can leave an inherit an asset protection trust. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that is an option. So when you create a trust, you get to choose how to distribute assets to your heirs. So they don't just have to get their assets at age 18, but you pick the timeline or schedule. So most trusts distribute assets at different ages or stages, like say 1/3 at age 25, 1/3 at age 30, and the remaining balance at age 35, or maybe half at graduation from college, and the balance upon graduation from graduate school. There's a lot of options. So this is obviously an acceptable and common way to plan, but there's an even better way for some of you. So if you want to protect your kids' inheritance, you can do that with a custom trust. So you can ensure that your kids receive their inheritance protected from lawsuits against them, future creditors, or even a future divorce. So just a quick example, when my friend's dad died, he left her an inheritance at the time she was married, and the inheritance came to her outright, and she didn't know how to keep it separate, as Judy was just talking about. As a lot of people don't understand how to keep it separate. So when she got divorced, her husband got half of its value. If her dad, on the other hand, had left her that money in a protected trust, she could have used that money to invest in her business or real estate and kept all of it when she got divorced. So yeah, that was my last main point, and I just wanted to thank you for being here and give you a little gift. So I wanted to offer $250 off your planning, of any planning you decide you would want to do with me. If you contact me in the next couple days, and we could set an appointment for May, I would be happy to give you that discount. So thank you so much for being here, and it was a pleasure speaking to you about all this.
All right, Mandie, and I would also like to say to the audience that we are offering a discount off of a financial plan, and anybody who has viewed this webinar, whether you've been on here live or you viewed it later, just mention it, and we are happy to do that at any time. We do have one more webinar on our calendar next month called Protecting Your Loved Ones. And I'll bring that up on the screen and let Robert take over as moderator to see if we have any audience questions.
Yeah, we do have two very quick questions from the audience. The first one is for Mandie regarding estate planning, and that is probate really worth avoiding in San Diego County, and how much could it really cost?
Oh, good question. Yes, it's really worth avoiding. It's the worst part is that it's very expensive. So it costs roughly 5% of the gross value of your estate. So that is going off of the fair market value of your house, not even just the equity value, plus all your bank accounts, investment accounts. So you can see that adds up really quickly. It's easily in the tens, 20 something thousands for many people. It's also really long. It's, at least a year, more commonly year and a half, could be 2 years, depending on the estate. Plus it's public, anyone can go look to see who's getting what, when. So yeah, it's a really nice gift to give your family to avoid that headache.
Makes me certainly not want to go through probate. Next question is for Judy. What would be your top 1 or 2 pieces of financial wisdom for someone who recently went through a divorce?
Great question. I would say that once the divorce is final, we like to go through all of the investment accounts and make sure everything is done that needs to get done, specifically beneficiary changes. And I know that Mandie talked about beneficiary changes pre-divorce, but post-divorce, we go through and do a beneficiary check and make sure all of the IRAs and retirement accounts have correct beneficiaries. And also make sure that the quadro, if there is a quadro, has been implemented. There have been times, and we have found where, and by the way, the quadro is a qualified domestic relations order that comes after the marital settlement agreement, or as part of the marital settlement agreement when everything is agreed upon, and all the financial things are agreed upon. If there are any retirement accounts such as 401ks, 457, 401as, simple IRAs, any retirement accounts, they need to be split. As Mandie had said earlier, they are frozen. These accounts become frozen during a divorce, and people can't make changes. And so after the divorce, if that account needs to be split, let's say 50-50 between spouses, the custodian of the account where that account is held has to go by the legal document in order to split it. It's not always 50-50. Sometimes it's 70-30 or, 69, 31. So it just depends on how long the marriage was and how long the person was contributing to the account. But that qualified domestic relations order has to be sent to the custodian. It has to go through their legal department. And once they process that, then and only then is the account split. If that fails to happen, then your spouse, let's just say you were owed part of your spouse's retirement, and you got the quadro, and you had your marital settlement agreement, but you didn't take the quadro to the custodian and have it processed, then your spouse might be able to retire and walk away with all of that retirement account, potentially. So it's very important.
Yeah. Sounds like you might have worked through that with a client or two.
Yes. Yes, we uncovered that the account was never split for a client one time. Luckily, it was before the spouse retired. But yeah, these things are overlooked from time to time, and they're very important.
Gotcha. Well, great insight, Judy. Thank you to both of you for your presentations, and we hope that the audience found everything informative. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'll be happy to get back with you. So we'll say bye-bye for now, and thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Hey, thank you.